James Montgomery's corner office on the 42nd floor of Manhattan's most prestigious law firm overlooked a city that never stopped moving, much like himself. At 38, he had mastered the art of control. Every case won, every deal closed, every aspect of his life perfectly orchestrated. Time was money, and James had plenty of both. That Tuesday afternoon in September started like any other. He straightened his custom-made Italian tie, a habit more than a necessity as he prepared for his final meeting of the day. The Anderson merger would add another 7 figures to his already impressive portfolio. Not that he needed it. His brownstone in the Upper East Side and vacation homes in the Hamptons and Aspen testified to his success. "Mr. Montgomery?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The Anderson team is ready in conference room A." "On my way," he replied, gathering his materials with practiced efficiency. The meeting went exactly as planned. James had long ago learned that emotion had no place in business. Logic, strategy, and an unwavering focus on the bottom line, these were the tools of success. As he signed the final documents, he allowed himself a small smile. Another victory for the firm. The sun was setting as he left the building, casting long shadows between the skyscrapers. James checked his watch. 6:45 p.m. Just enough time to grab dinner at his usual spot before heading home to review tomorrow's cases. That's when he heard the scream. "Stella, no." Time slowed to a crawl. A little girl with golden curls darted between parked cars, chasing after a purple balloon. 20 feet ahead, a yellow taxi accelerated through a fresh green light. James's body moved before his mind could process the situation. His briefcase clattered to the sidewalk as he lunged forward, wrapping one arm around the child's waist and pulling her back, just as the taxi horn blared past them. The girl's small body trembled against his chest. James's heart pounded with an unfamiliar rhythm. Fear, adrenaline, and something else he couldn't quite name. "Oh my God! Stella!" An elderly woman rushed forward, face pale with terror. She gathered the little girl into her arms, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "I only looked away for a second. She saw the balloon and—" The woman's voice broke as she clutched her granddaughter tighter. James straightened up, brushing off his suit with shaking hands. The girl, Stella, peered at him over her grandmother's shoulder, her blue eyes wide with wonder rather than fear. "You ran so fast," she exclaimed, "like a superhero." A strange warmth spread through James's chest. He'd been called many things in his life: brilliant, ruthless, successful, but never a superhero. "Just be more careful next time, okay?" he managed, surprised by the gentleness in his own voice. "I don't know how to thank you," the grandmother said, finally composing herself. "If you hadn't been there—" "No thanks necessary," James replied automatically, retrieving his briefcase. He turned to leave, already calculating how this delay would affect his evening schedule. "Wait," Stella called out. "What's your name, superhero?" James hesitated, then turned back. "James," he said simply. "I'm Stella. I'm 5. She held up 5 fingers proudly. "And this is my Grandma Rose. She watches me while Mommy works at the hospital." Something about her innocent enthusiasm made James pause. In his world of corporate takeovers and legal strategy, such pure, unguarded emotion was rare. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. Probably his assistant with tomorrow's schedule updates. "I should go," he said, nodding to Rose. "Take care, Stella." As he walked away, James tried to shake off the lingering warmth in his chest. He had meetings to prepare for, cases to review. He didn't have time for distractions, especially not ones involving precocious 5-year-olds with golden curls and fearless smiles. But as he sat in his usual restaurant that evening, picking at his perfectly prepared salmon, James found his thoughts drifting back to the incident, the fear in Rose's voice, the trust in Stella's eyes, the strange feeling that had coursed through him when he held her safely in his arms. He pushed the thoughts aside and opened his laptop. The Richardson brief needed his attention, and James Montgomery didn't become New York's top corporate lawyer by dwelling on chance encounters with little girls and their balloons. Yet later that night, As he stood in his immaculately decorated bedroom, looking out over the glittering city lights, James realized something had shifted. Like a crack in a pristine window, barely visible but impossible to ignore. For the first time in years, his carefully ordered world felt somehow incomplete. He just didn't know why. What he couldn't possibly know was that this random Tuesday, this simple act of instinct, would be the day everything changed. The day the universe decided that James Montgomery's perfectly controlled life was due for an unexpected revision. And it would start with a little girl named Stella and lead to someone who would challenge everything he thought he knew about success, happiness, and love. 3 days after the incident with Stella, James found himself irritated by the line at his regular coffee shop. He checked his Rolex, 7:45 a.m. The Wilson case review started at 8:30, and he needed time to prepare. The morning crowd of professionals, clutching their phones and laptops, shifted impatiently around him. "Grande Americano, extra shot," he said when he finally reached the counter, not bothering to look up from his email. "Make that too, Mrs. Patel," a tired voice called from behind him. "And could you grab one of those chocolate chip cookies? The big ones. Stella had a rough night." James's head snapped up at the name. He turned to find a woman in light blue scrubs, her honey brown hair pulled back in a messy bun. Dark circles under her eyes suggested a long night shift, but there was something striking about her face, a quiet strength in her features that made him pause. "Did you say Stella?" The words left his mouth before he could stop them. The woman tensed slightly, maternal instinct flickering across her face. "Yes. Why? About this tall?" He gestured with his hand. "Blonde curls, loves purple balloons?" Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by disbelief. "You're him, the man who saved her on Tuesday." She shifted her weight, studying him with new interest. "Mom wouldn't stop talking about you, called you her guardian angel in an expensive suit." James felt an unfamiliar urge to smile. "James Montgomery," he offered, extending his hand. "Madeline Carter." Her handshake was firm, professional. Up close, he noticed her eyes were a deep green, flecked with gold. "I've been wanting to thank you properly. What you did, Mommy." A small whirlwind of energy burst through the coffee shop door, followed by an out-of-breath Rose. "They had my favorite cookie." Stella stopped short when she saw James, her whole face lighting up. "The superhero. Grandma, look." Rose caught up, recognition and warmth spreading across her features. "Mr. Montgomery, what a wonderful surprise." James found himself surrounded by their energy, so different from the calculated interactions of his professional life. Stella tugged at his suit jacket, looking up at him with complete trust. "Do you like cookies?" she asked seriously. "Mom says they make everything better, even when you have to get shots at the doctor." "Stella," Madeline warned gently, but James surprised himself by crouching down to the girl's level. "I haven't had a cookie in a very long time," he admitted. Stella's eyes widened in horror. "Mommy, can we share with him, please?" Madeline hesitated, and James saw something vulnerable flash across her face. "I'm sure Mr. Montgomery is very busy." "James," he corrected, standing up. "And I have a few minutes." Another lie. The Wilson case wouldn't review itself. They found a small table by the window. Rose excused herself to run errands, leaving them in a moment that felt strangely intimate for 8 a.m. in a Manhattan coffee shop. Stella broke her cookie carefully in half, presenting the larger portion to James with solemn ceremony. "It's chocolate chip," she informed him. "The best kind." James accepted it gravely, watching as Madeline tried to wipe chocolate from her daughter's cheeks. There was something mesmerizing about their interaction, the gentle corrections, the shared smiles, the obvious love between them. "So," Madeline said, finally settling back with her coffee. "Guardian angel lawyer, huh?" "Corporate law," he clarified. "Nothing quite so heroic." Still, not everyone would have reacted so quickly. She met his eyes directly. "Thank you." "Really? What about you?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Night shift at Presbyterian, I'm a pediatric nurse. She smiled tiredly. Not quite as glamorous as corporate law, but it has its moments. Mommy makes kids feel better, Stella contributed proudly. She gives them special stickers when they're brave. James watched Madeline's face soften at her daughter's words, something twisted in his chest, an emotion he couldn't quite name. That sounds more important than anything I do. Madeline's eyes flickered to his, surprised by his sincerity. For a moment neither spoke, caught in a strange current of understanding. His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. 8:15, the Wilson case. I should go, he said, standing reluctantly. Thank you for the cookie, Stella. Will we see you again? Stella asked, chocolate smeared across her chin. James looked at Madeline, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in her eyes. I come here most mornings, he said carefully. Madeline nodded, something guarded in her expression. We'll see you around then. As he walked to his office, James found himself thinking about the way Madeline's hand had brushed her daughter's hair back, the gentle authority in her voice, the hint of vulnerability when she thanked him. It was distracting. The Wilson case demanded his attention, but his mind kept drifting to green eyes flecked with gold and the taste of chocolate chip cookies. His carefully ordered world had developed another crack, and this one felt dangerous. That evening, as he sat in his silent penthouse reviewing contracts, James realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd shared a meal with anyone, let alone a cookie with a 5-year-old. His life was exactly as he'd built it, successful, controlled, solitary, so why did it suddenly feel empty? He thought of Madeline's tired smile, the way she'd looked at her daughter, the obvious love between them, messy and real and alive in a way his own existence wasn't. James Montgomery had built his career on reading people, on calculating risks and rewards. He knew he should walk away. Single mothers with precocious daughters weren't part of his life plan. They were complicated, messy, emotional, everything he'd spent years avoiding. But as he stared at the city lights, James found himself wondering what time the coffee shop opened tomorrow morning, and for the first time in his adult life he had no idea what that meant. The next 2 weeks fell into an unspoken pattern. James found himself arriving at the coffee shop precisely at 7:45 a.m., just as Madeline finished her night shift. He told himself it was coincidence, just as he told himself he hadn't memorized her schedule. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, sometimes Saturdays. Always with Stella in tow, fresh from her grandmother's care. Today was Thursday, and James was already on his second cup of coffee when they walked in. Stella's face lit up at the sight of him, but it was Madeline's slight smile that made his heart rate quicken. Your usual spot is free, he said, gesturing to their preferred corner table. He'd been subtly guarding it for the past 20 minutes, though he'd never admit it. You don't have to keep waiting for us, Madeline said, but her voice held a warmth that contradicted her words. I have calls with London, time difference. Another lie. He was getting good at those lately. Stella climbed into the chair next to him, already pulling out a worn coloring book. Want to help? Mom says I'm getting better at staying in the lines. James glanced at his watch. The Morrison briefing wasn't for another hour. Sure, kiddo. What are we coloring today? A unicorn. Stella pushed a purple crayon into his hand. This is the best color. Madeline watched them, something unreadable in her expression. Stella, honey, I'm sure Mr. Montgomery has important meetings to get to. James, he corrected for what felt like the 100th time. And the unicorn clearly needs attention. Morrison can wait. Her eyebrow arched. I thought you had calls with London. Caught. He met her gaze steadily, accepting the challenge in her eyes. Would you have coffee with me? Dinner, actually, without London calls as an excuse. The warmth in her face froze over. I don't date James. Mom takes care of me, Stella said matter-of-factly, not looking up from her coloring. And I take care of Mom, right, Mommy? Madeline's hand trembled slightly as she set down her coffee cup. That's right, baby. James recognized deflection when he saw it. He'd built a career on it. It's just dinner, Madeline. No, it's not. Her voice was soft but firm. You're kind, and Stella adores you, but I can't. The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken words. Stella hummed quietly, oblivious to the tension as she carefully colored her unicorn's mane. Can I ask why? James kept his voice neutral, the same tone he used in delicate negotiations. Madeline's eyes flickered to Stella, then back to him. Because nothing good comes from pretending things are simple when they're not. Before he could respond, her pager buzzed. Emergency at the hospital, she said, standing quickly. Mom will be here in 5 minutes to get Stella. I have to go. I can stay with her, James offered without thinking. Until Rose arrives. Madeline stared at him, conflict clear on her face. I couldn't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. He pulled out his phone, already emailing his assistant to reschedule Morrison. We'll finish the unicorn. Right, Stella? Purple is your color, Stella agreed seriously, handing him another crayon. Madeline hesitated, then leaned down to kiss Stella's forehead. Be good for James, baby. Grandma will be here soon. As she hurried out, James caught a glimpse of something in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or possibility. He wasn't sure which scared him more. Rose arrived 15 minutes later, thanking him profusely. James walked to his office, his thoughts, a mess of green gold eyes and careful deflections. He'd built his career on reading people, on understanding their motivations. But Madeline Carter was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. That evening, he found himself doing something he'd never done before. Research that had nothing to do with a case. His browser history filled with articles about single parents, about loss and grief and moving forward, about the complex dynamics of dating someone with children. The pieces started falling into place. The way Madeline tensed when he got too close, how she watched Stella interact with him, pride warring with protection in her eyes, the careful distance she maintained even as their morning coffee ritual became more frequent. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Thank you for staying with Stella this morning. You didn't have to do that. James stared at the message, wondering how she'd got his number. Probably Rose. It was my pleasure, he typed back. She's quite the artist. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Why are you doing this, James? He looked around his pristine penthouse, at the life he'd built so carefully. Everything in its place. Every decision calculated for maximum benefit. Safe. Controlled. Empty. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not sure, he replied honestly. And that terrifies me almost as much as it terrifies you. The dots appeared again, lingering longer this time. When her response came, it was like a punch to the gut. I buried my husband 4 years ago. Terror isn't the word for what I feel when I think about doing that again. James sat back, the pieces clicking into place. Not just a single mother. A widow. The weight of her resistance suddenly made sense. I'm sorry, he wrote, meaning it more than any condolence he'd ever offered. I didn't know. Now you do, came her reply. So you understand why this, whatever this is, can't happen. He thought about Stella's easy trust, about the way Madeline's smile seemed to crack something open in his chest, about the quiet strength it must take to raise a child alone, to keep going after such loss. What if I said I'm willing to take it as slow as you need? His finger hovered over the send button for a long moment before pressing it. This time, her response was quick. What if I said I'm not willing to risk my daughter's heart, or mine? James stared at the message, feeling the weight of everything unspoken behind those words. In court, he always had an answer, a counter-argument, a way forward. But this wasn't a case to be won. This was about fear and love and loss. Territory he'd spent his whole life avoiding. Then I'd say I respect that, he wrote finally. But I'll still be at the coffee shop at 7:45, no pressure, no expectations. Just coffee and coloring books if that's all you're comfortable with. The dots appeared one last time, dancing across his screen like a promise or a warning. Good night, James. He set the phone down, walking to his floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sparkled below, millions of lives intersecting in countless ways. Somewhere out there, a pediatric nurse was probably tucking her daughter into bed, carrying the weight of loss and love and responsibility on her shoulders. For the first time in his life, James Montgomery wanted to share someone else's burden. He just had to figure out how to prove he was strong enough to help carry it. October painted Central Park in shades of gold and crimson, and James found himself doing something unprecedented, taking a Saturday afternoon off. He sat on a bench near the playground, pretending to review contracts while actually watching Stella chase leaves in the crisp autumn air. Madeline sat beside him close enough that he could smell her vanilla-scented shampoo, far enough that they didn't quite touch. "You really don't have to spend your Saturday like this," she said. "Not for the first time. I know." He closed his laptop, finally admitting to himself he hadn't read a single word. "I want to." The past 3 weeks had settled into a delicate dance. Coffee shop mornings expanded into text messages, nothing too personal, just photos of Stella's artwork or quick updates about their days. He'd started bringing coffee to the hospital during Madeline's breaks, claiming he was in the neighborhood for client meetings that didn't exist. "Look what I found." Stella ran up, leaves tangled in her curls, holding out a perfect red maple leaf. "It's as big as my face." "It's beautiful," James said, helping her shake the other leaves from her hair. His fingers moved with a gentleness that still surprised him. "Should we add it to your collection?" Stella nodded enthusiastically, carefully placing the leaf in the paper bag they'd brought for just this purpose. James caught Madeline watching them, something soft and scared in her expression. "Grandma says we can get hot chocolate," Stella announced. "Can James come too?" Madeline hesitated, and James prepared himself for another gentle deflection. But instead she said, "If he'd like to." The small cafe near the park was crowded with Saturday afternoon tourists, but they found a quiet corner table. Stella's hot chocolate came topped with whipped cream and sprinkles, which inevitably ended up more on her face than in her mouth. "Here," James said, reaching for a napkin at the same moment Madeline did. Their hands brushed, and neither pulled away. Immediately, the contact sent electricity up his arm. "Sorry," Madeline murmured, but she was smiling slightly. "Don't be." He held her gaze, trying to convey everything he couldn't say with Stella sitting right there. "Mom, can we show James our special place?" Stella asked, oblivious to the moment passing between them. Madeline broke eye contact, turning to her daughter. "Honey, I'm sure James has other plans." "Actually, I don't." He surprised himself with the truth of it. He'd canceled a golf game with potential clients, rescheduled a strategy meeting. His Saturday stretched empty before him, full of possibility. 20 minutes later, they stood in a small butterfly garden tucked away in a quiet corner of the park. Late-season monarchs danced between the remaining flowers, their wings catching the autumn sunlight. "Dad used to bring us here," Stella said matter-of-factly, watching a butterfly land on a nearby flower. "He said the butterflies were like magic." James felt Madeline tense beside him. He wanted to reach for her hand, but held back, respecting the invisible boundary between them. "He was right," James said carefully. "They are pretty magical." Stella wandered ahead, trying to count the butterflies, leaving them in a moment of charged silence. "She talks about him more with you," Madeline said quietly. "I don't know if that's good or terrible." "Why would it be terrible?" She crossed her arms, a defensive gesture he'd come to recognize. "Because she's starting to trust you. Because you're becoming important to her. Because—" She cut herself off, biting her lip. "Because you're starting to trust me too?" He kept his voice gentle, non-threatening. "I can't." But she didn't move away when he took a step closer. "Can't? Or won't?" She looked up at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Another step. They were inches apart now. "Everything about you matters to me, Madeline." James. His name was half warning, half plea. Tell me to step back, he said softly. Tell me to walk away. I will. But you have to say it. She stayed silent, frozen in place as he slowly raised his hand to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers trembled slightly. James Montgomery, who never showed weakness in the courtroom, who never lost control, was terrified of this moment. Mom, look. Stella's voice broke the spell. She came running back, clutching another leaf for her collection. Madeline stepped away quickly, but not before James saw the flush in her cheeks, the rapid rise and fall of her chest. They walked Stella to Rose's apartment later, the little girl falling asleep on James's shoulder during the taxi ride. He carried her upstairs, following Madeline's lead. Thank you, she said softly as Rose took a sleeping Stella from his arms. For today. For everything. Have dinner with me, he said before she could retreat. Just dinner, tomorrow night. Rose already offered to watch Stella. Madeline's eyes widened. You planned this with my mother? Rose and I might have discussed it during our coffee shop conversations. He smiled slightly. She's very persuasive. She's interfering, Madeline corrected, but there was no real anger in her voice. Is it working? She studied him for a long moment, and James felt like he was standing on the edge of something monumental. Finally, she took a deep breath. One dinner, she said. But James, I need you to understand something. What? If this goes wrong, if we go wrong, it's not just me who gets hurt. Stella. She swallowed hard. She's already lost one father figure. I won't risk her losing another. The weight of her words hit him like a physical force. Father figure. The term should have terrified him. A month ago, it would have sent him running for the safety of his ordered, solitary life. Instead, he thought of tiny hands holding crayons, of golden curls against his shoulder, of trust freely given and carefully protected. I understand, he said quietly. And Madeline? I'm not going anywhere. She nodded once quickly as if afraid she'd change her mind. Pick me up at 7? 7, he confirmed, resisting the urge to reach for her again. Good night, Madeline. As he walked to his waiting taxi, James felt something shift inside him. The careful walls he'd built around his heart were cracking, letting in light and fear and possibility. Tomorrow night wasn't just dinner. It was a step into unknown territory, into a world where love meant risk and family meant more than blood. For the first time in his life, James Montgomery was ready to take that risk. He just hoped Madeline was ready to take it with him. 7 o'clock found James standing outside Madeline's modest brownstone in Queens, feeling more nervous than he had before any court appearance. He checked his watch, 6:58 p.m., too early to knock. He'd spent 30 minutes circling the block, not wanting to appear too eager. The door opened before he could knock. Madeline stood there in a simple navy blue dress, her honey brown hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. James forgot how to breathe for a moment. Were you planning to stand there all night? She asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. I was aiming for fashionably prompt. He held out a small bouquet of white gardenias. These reminded me of you. They're beautiful. She took them, their fingers brushing. Come in for a moment. I should put these in water. The apartment was modest but warm, filled with photographs and children's artwork. A far cry from his sterile penthouse. Stella's toys were neatly organized in colorful bins, and textbooks on pediatric nursing sat beside fairy tale collections on the bookshelf. This is home, Madeline said softly, noticing his observation. There was a slight defensiveness in her tone. It's perfect, he replied honestly. It feels lived in, loved. She relaxed slightly, arranging the flowers in a glass vase. Where are we going tonight? I thought we'd try something different. He held out his hand. Do you trust me? Madeline stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment. I'm trying to, she finally admitted, placing her hand in his. Instead of the high-end restaurants he usually frequented, James drove them to a small Italian place in Little Italy. Strings of lights twinkled overhead in the courtyard, and the smell of fresh herbs and garlic filled the air. "This isn't what I expected," Madeline said as they were seated at a corner table. "Let me guess, you thought I'd choose somewhere with crystal chandeliers and wine lists longer than legal briefs?" She laughed, the sound making his heart skip. The thought had crossed my mind. "This place," he paused, debating whether to share the truth. "My parents used to bring me here before they died. It's one of the few memories I have of them actually being happy together." Madeline's expression softened. "I didn't know you'd lost them." "Car accident, I was 12. He hadn't talked about this in years. My uncle raised me after that. Taught me that success was the only protection against loss. Emotions were weakness. Love was a liability." "And you believed him?" "Until 3 weeks ago? Yes." He met her eyes across the table. "Then I met a little girl with golden curls, and her mother with impossible green eyes, and suddenly none of those rules made sense anymore." Madeline's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. "James, I'm not trying to pressure you," he said quickly. I want you to know that I understand loss. Maybe not the same way you do, but I understand being afraid to let people in." The waiter arrived with wine and fresh bread, giving them both a moment to collect themselves. When he left, Madeline took a deep breath. "Daniel, my husband, he was a kindergarten teacher," she said quietly. "He loved children more than anyone I've ever known. When we found out about Stella," she smiled sadly, "I'd never seen anyone so excited to be a father." James stayed silent, letting her continue at her own pace. The accident happened on a Tuesday. He was picking up supplies for Stella's first birthday party. A drunk driver ran a red light. Her voice cracked slightly. "1 minute I was planning a party, the next I was planning a funeral." Without thinking, James reached across the table, taking her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. "How did you do it?" he asked softly. "Keep going?" "I had to. Stella needed me." She squeezed his hand. "She saved me, really. Gave me a reason to get up every morning, to keep breathing, to find joy again." "She's extraordinary," James said. "Like her mother." Madeline's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "Smooth talker. Honest talker." He rubbed his thumb across her knuckles. "I know I'm not Daniel. I'm not trying to be. But Madeline, what I feel for you, for Stella, it's real, and it terrifies me as much as it terrifies you." "Why?" "Because for the first time in my life, I want something more than success. More than control. More than safety." He took a shaky breath. "I want morning coffee with bedhead Stella and exhausted but beautiful you. I want purple crayons and butterfly gardens and the mess and chaos and joy of it all." A tear slipped down Madeline's cheek. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not simple. It's probably the most complicated thing I've ever wanted." He wiped her tear away gently. "But I think it could be worth it if you're willing to try." The waiter returned with their food, but neither moved to eat. They sat in charged silence, years of carefully constructed walls crumbling between them. Finally, Madeline spoke. "Stella asks about you when you're not there. She started drawing you into her family pictures." James's heart clenched. "And how do you feel about that?" "Scared, hopeful, guilty." She met his eyes. "Daniel will always be her father. Always." "I know." He squeezed her hand. "I'm not trying to replace him. I just want a chance to build something new. With both of you." Madeline was quiet for a long moment, then a small smile touched her lips. "You know, for a corporate lawyer, you're surprisingly good with words. Only when they matter." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing it softly. "And you matter, Madeline Carter. You and Stella matter more than anything." They ate their dinner slowly, sharing stories between bites. Madeline told him about her first date with Daniel, about Stella's birth, about the small moments that made up a life. James shared memories of his parents, of law school dreams, of the emptiness of success without connection. Later, as they walked through the lamp-lit streets, Madeline slipped her hand into his. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For being patient, for understanding, for—" She stopped walking, turning to face him. "For making me want to be brave again." James looked down at her, at the strength and vulnerability in her eyes, at the slight tremble of her lips. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he leaned down. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. When they broke apart, Madeline's eyes were bright with tears and possibility. "I can't promise it will be easy," she whispered. "I don't want easy." He rested his forehead against hers. "I want real. I want you." She kissed him again, and James felt the last of his carefully constructed walls collapse. In their place grew something new, something messy and frightening and beautiful, something that felt remarkably like love. November brought early snow to New York, and with it came the first real test of James and Madeline's fledgling relationship. The Anderson merger had exploded into crisis mode, demanding James's constant attention. 3 days of missed coffee dates and abbreviated text messages left him feeling untethered, missing the morning routine he'd come to cherish. "Mr. Montgomery?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The Tokyo team is ready for the conference call." James glanced at his phone. No messages from Madeline since yesterday. He'd missed Stella's school presentation, something about dinosaurs that she'd been practicing for weeks. "Give me 2 minutes," he replied, quickly typing out a message. "I'm sorry about today. Make it up to you both this weekend." The response came quickly. "Stella understood. She saved you a cookie from her presentation." His heart twisted. The old James would have been relieved at having an excuse to miss a child's school event. Now, the thought of disappointing Stella felt worse than losing a major case. The Tokyo call dragged into evening, followed by emergency meetings with local council. By the time James left the office, it was past midnight. Snow fell softly as his driver navigated the quiet streets, and an impulse seized him. "Parker, could you make a detour to Queens?" Madeline's neighborhood was peaceful under the blanket of snow. A light still burned in her second-floor window. Night shift preparation, he knew. Before he could talk himself out of it, he pulled out his phone. "Are you awake?" 3 dots appeared immediately. "Always before a night shift. Everything okay?" "Look outside." He watched her shadow appear at the window, then the front door opened quietly. Madeline stepped out onto the small porch, wrapped in a thick cardigan. "James?" She descended the steps carefully. "What are you doing here?" "I missed you." The words felt raw, honest. "These past few days, I missed you." She reached him, snow catching in her hair. "You could have called." "I needed to see you." He brushed a snowflake from her cheek. "I'm not good at this, Madeline. At balancing everything. At knowing how to be what you and Stella need while still being who I am." Understanding softened her features. "We don't need you to be anyone but yourself. But what if that's not enough? What if—" She silenced him with a kiss, soft and sure. When she pulled back, her eyes were serious. "Do you know what Stella said today after her presentation?" He shook his head. "She said she was proud of you for helping people, just like I help sick kids at the hospital." Madeline smiled slightly. "She gets it, James. That sometimes the people we love have important work to do." The word love hung between them, unacknowledged but powerful. "I want to be better at this," he said quietly. "For both of you. Then be better. But don't torture yourself for being human." She touched his face gently. "Come inside for a minute? Someone left you a dinosaur cookie?" The apartment was warm and dimly lit. Stella's presentation poster hung proudly on the wall, a colorful display of prehistoric creatures with surprisingly accurate facts written in careful child's handwriting. She worked so hard on it, Madeline said, retrieving a slightly squashed cookie from a container. The teacher said she was the only one who memorized all the scientific names. Pride swelled in James's chest. She's brilliant. She is. Madeline hesitated, then added, she also told everyone her superhero was there in spirit. James's throat tightened. Madeline, Shh. She pressed the cookie into his hand. Eat your T-Rex. It's made with love. As he took a bite of the slightly stale cookie, James noticed a new addition to the photo wall, a picture from their day in Central Park, Stella between them, all three laughing at something now forgotten. They looked like a family. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt right. I have an idea, he said suddenly. But it might be crazy. Madeline raised an eyebrow. Coming from Mr. Always in Control, this should be interesting. Move in with me. She stilled completely. What? Not immediately, he added quickly. But eventually. My penthouse is closer to Stella's school, closer to the hospital. There's a great room for her, views of the park. We could… James. Her voice was gentle but firm. Breathe. He ran a hand through his snow-damp hair. Too fast? Maybe a little. But she was smiling. Let's try something smaller first. Like what? Like dinner tomorrow night. Here, with Stella. No suits, no business calls, just us. The simplicity of it caught him off guard. I'd like that. And maybe. She bit her lip. Maybe you could stay over sometimes. When you're working late. When you don't want to go all the way back to Manhattan. Really? Really? She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around his waist. But James? We take it slow. For Stella's sake. He held her close, breathing in the vanilla scent of her hair. I can do slow. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the soft tick of the kitchen clock. Outside, snow continued to fall, transforming the city into something magical and new. I should go, James said finally. You need to get ready for your shift. Madeline walked him to the door, but before he could leave, she caught his hand. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for the cookie and for understanding. She kissed him softly. We're figuring this out together, okay? No pressure, no rushing, just together. As James walked back to his car, he felt lighter, despite the late hour and the crisis waiting at the office. His phone buzzed, a message from Madeline. Check your briefcase tomorrow morning, someone slipped in a surprise. The next day, he found a carefully folded paper dinosaur tucked between his legal briefs, decorated with purple crayon and glitter. Across the bottom, in Stella's handwriting, To my superhero, love, Stella. James sat at his desk, holding the delicate creation, and realized something profound. Success wasn't about control anymore. It was about finding the courage to let love make a mess of your perfectly ordered life. And for the first time, he was ready to embrace the chaos. December arrived with glittering frost and holiday anticipation. James had settled into a new rhythm, one that involved bedtime stories and morning rushes to school, impromptu dinner dates and late-night conversations. His penthouse gathered dust while he spent more and more time in Queens, learning the beautiful chaos of family life. Tonight he sat at Madeline's kitchen table, reviewing case files while Stella worked on her homework beside him. The domesticity of it still surprised him in the best possible way. James? Stella's voice pulled him from a contract review. What's another word for happy? He set down his pen. How about joyful or delighted? Perfect. She scribbled in her notebook. I'm writing about Christmas. The mention of the holiday made James's stomach twist. He hadn't told them yet about the Tokyo deal, how it would require him to be abroad for 2 weeks, including Christmas. He'd been putting it off, dreading their disappointment. "Speaking of Christmas," he began, but Madeline burst through the front door, still in her scrubs, face pale. "Mom?" Stella looked up, instantly alert to her mother's distress. "Baby, could you go to your room for a few minutes? I need to talk to James." Stella gathered her homework, throwing worried glances over her shoulder as she left. James stood, reaching for Madeline. "What's wrong?" She sank into a chair, hands trembling. "They're closing the pediatric ward." "What?" He knelt beside her. "When?" "January, budget cuts." Her voice cracked. "They're transferring some staff to other departments, but most of us, we have to find new positions, and in this market," James's mind raced. "I have contacts at Presbyterian Mount Sinai." "James." She touched his cheek. "There's more." His heart sank. "Tell me." "There's an opening. A good one. Head pediatric nurse at Boston Children's Hospital." She met his eyes. "They want me. To start in February." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Boston, nearly 4 hours away. That's... He struggled to find words. "That's a prestigious position." "It is." She stood, pacing the small kitchen. "The salary is better. The opportunities for advancement are incredible, and they have an amazing school system. But it's Boston." He couldn't keep the edge from his voice. Madeline stopped pacing. "I haven't accepted yet." "But you're considering it." "I have to." Her eyes filled with tears. "James, I'm a single mother. I have to think about Stella's future, about security. You're not alone anymore." He moved toward her. "Let me help. I can make calls, find you something here." "And then what?" She stepped back. "Be indebted to you? Have my career depend on your connections?" "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it?" She wrapped her arms around herself. "You're used to fixing things, James. Making problems disappear with money or influence, but this needs to be my decision." The words stung. "So I don't get a say? After everything?" "Of course you do." She softened slightly. "But I need to know I can stand on my own feet. For Stella, for myself." Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. The Tokyo team. Again. "Take it," Madeline said quietly. "We both have decisions to make." He ignored the call. "I was going to tell you tonight about Tokyo." "What about it?" "They need me there, for 2 weeks." He swallowed hard. "Over Christmas." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "When do you leave?" "Next week." Silence filled the kitchen, heavy with unspoken fears. Finally, Madeline laughed, but it held no humor. "Perfect timing, right? You'll be in Tokyo while I decide whether to uproot our lives." "Madeline, can I come out now?" Stella's voice called from her room. "Yes, baby." Madeline wiped her eyes quickly. Stella emerged cautiously, looking between them. "Is everything okay?" James watched Madeline paste on a smile. "Just grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about." But Stella was too perceptive. She climbed into James's lap, something she'd started doing recently that never failed to melt his heart. "Are you sad?" she asked both of them. "No, kiddo." James hugged her close. "Just dealing with some complicated things. Like when I have to choose between chocolate and vanilla ice cream?" Despite everything, Madeline laughed genuinely. "Something like that." "Well," Stella said seriously, "sometimes I get both. Or something completely different, like strawberry." James met Madeline's eyes over Stella's head. Pretty wise for a 5-year-old. "Almost 6, Stella corrected. "And Mom says I'm precocious," Madeline supplied, her expression softening as she watched them. Later, after Stella was asleep, they sat on the small balcony despite the cold. Christmas lights twinkled from neighboring buildings, and somewhere distant sirens wailed. "I don't want to lose this," James said quietly. "This? Us. This family we're building." He turned to face her. "I know it's fast And maybe I'm crazy, but Madeline, I love you. Both of you. She caught her breath. It was the first time he'd said it. I love you too, she whispered. That's what makes this so hard. Then let's figure it out together. After Tokyo, after the holidays, we'll find a solution. And if we can't? He took her hand, cold, from the winter air. Then we'll make one. I'm not giving up on us that easily. Madeline leaned into him and he wrapped his arm around her. They sat in silence, watching their breath fog in the December night, both aware that their perfect bubble had burst. Stay tonight? She asked finally. Always. Later, lying in bed with Madeline curled against him, James stared at the ceiling. In the next room, Stella's nightlight cast star patterns on the wall. His Tokyo itinerary sat unopened in his email, and somewhere in Boston, a job offer waited for Madeline's answer. For the first time since meeting them, James felt truly afraid. Not of commitment or of love, he'd conquered those fears. No, he was afraid of losing the very thing he'd never known he wanted. This small, perfect family that had claimed his heart. As if sensing his thoughts, Madeline stirred in her sleep, moving closer. James held her tighter, making a silent promise to the darkness. He would fight for them. No matter what it took, he would find a way to keep his family together. The question was, would love be enough? Tokyo's skyline glittered through James's hotel window, a maze of lights that couldn't compete with the Christmas decorations back home. He checked his phone, 3 a.m. in Japan, 1 p.m. in New York. Right on schedule, his video call connected. James. Stella's face filled the screen, nose pressed too close to the camera. Look what I made. She held up a construction paper Christmas tree decorated with glitter and photos. In the center, she'd placed the picture from Central Park, their first real family photo. It's beautiful, sweetheart. His throat tightened. Are you being good for your mom? Always. Stella's grin turned mischievous. Mom's been sad, though. She misses you. The camera shifted, and Madeline appeared, looking tired but beautiful. Stella, honey, remember what we said about private conversations? Sorry. But she didn't look sorry at all. Can I show James my room at Grandma's? As Stella bounced away with the phone, Madeline's voice came through softly. She's staying with Mom while I do hospital interviews. James's chest tightened. 1 week into his Tokyo trip and everything felt like it was slipping away. How did Mount Sinai go? Good, actually. They're interested, but... She trailed off. But Boston's offer is better. Yeah. They hadn't really discussed it since that night in her kitchen. The uncertainty hung between them, made worse by the physical distance. Mom! Stella called from off-screen. Can I open one of my presents early, please? Nice try, young lady. Madeline managed a small smile. 5 more days until Christmas. 5 days. James would still be in Tokyo, missing their first Christmas together. The thought was almost unbearable. I should go, he said reluctantly. Early meeting with the legal team. James? Madeline's voice stopped him before he could disconnect. I wish you were here. Me too. He touched the screen gently. More than you know. After the call ended, James stood at the window, watching the pre-dawn city below. The Tokyo deal was nearly complete, his biggest career achievement to date. Yet somehow, it felt hollow compared to what he might lose. His phone buzzed with a text from Madeline. Check your email. There's something you need to see. Curious, he opened his laptop. The email contained a video file, apparently recorded that morning. He pressed play. Stella appeared, sitting at her little desk, looking serious. Hi, James. Mom helped me make this because I have something important to ask you. The camera panned to show her desk covered in drawings, dozens of them. Each showed the same scene. Stella, Madeline, and James standing together, usually with a house in the background. See these? Stella held up several pictures. This is my family, but... She bit her lip, suddenly shy. But I was wondering if maybe you could be my dad. Not instead of my first dad, she added quickly, but like an extra dad. Mom says some kids are lucky enough to have two. James sank into a chair, his heart pounding. You don't have to answer right away, Stella continued. Mom says it's a big question, but I really want you to stay with us forever. And she leaned closer to the camera, whispering, Mom wants that too, even though she's scared. The video ended, with Stella blowing a kiss to the camera. James sat in the dark hotel room overwhelmed by emotion. After a long moment, he pulled out his phone. I saw it, he texted Madeline. 3 dots appeared immediately. She insisted on making it. I hope it wasn't too much. It was perfect, but Madeline, are you sure? About letting her ask? Yes. About everything else? I'm terrified. James took a deep breath, then did something unprecedented. He called his assistant in New York. Clara, I need you to cancel everything for the next 3 days and get me on the next flight home. 20 hours later, James stood outside Madeline's apartment, snow falling gently around him. It was just past midnight on December 21st. He knocked softly, knowing she'd be awake before her night shift. The door opened and Madeline froze, eyes wide. James? What? How? He stepped forward, pulling her into his arms. I couldn't wait 5 more days. But Tokyo, the deal, can wait. He pulled back to look at her. I've made a decision. About what? Everything. He led her to the couch, taking both her hands in his. I'm opening a new branch of the firm. She blinked. What? In Boston. He squeezed her hands. If you take that job, which you should because it's an amazing opportunity, I'll open our Boston office. I've already talked to the partners. They've been wanting to expand, and with virtual courts and remote work being so common now. James. Her voice shook. You can't uproot your entire life for us. That's where you're wrong. He touched her face gently. You and Stella are my life now. The rest is just logistics. But I love you, he interrupted. Both of you. And I want to be Stella's extra dad if she'll have me. I want to build a life with you, whether that's here or in Boston or anywhere else. I want Christmas mornings and school presentations and family dinners. I want everything. Tears spilled down Madeline's cheeks. You're serious about this? Completely. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. In fact, her breath caught. James. I had this whole plan for Christmas, he said, opening the box to reveal a stunning but elegant diamond ring. But then I saw Stella's video and I realized something. We've been so caught up in the problems, distance, jobs, timing, that we almost missed the solution. Which is, that love is the answer, not the problem. He slid off the couch, kneeling before her. Madeline Carter, I love you. I love your daughter. I love our messy, complicated, beautiful life together. Will you marry me? She stared at the ring, then at him, tears flowing freely now. You're crazy, you know that? Leaving Tokyo, planning to move to Boston? Is that a yes? Instead of answering, she pulled him up into a kiss that told him everything he needed to know. When they finally broke apart, she was smiling through her tears. Yes, she whispered. Yes to everything. A small gasp came from the hallway. They turned to find Stella standing there in her pajamas, eyes wide with wonder. Really? She asked, looking between them. Really, really? James held out his arms and she ran to them. He lifted her onto his lap as Madeline slipped the ring on her finger. Really, really, he confirmed, holding his family close. If that's okay with you, kiddo. Stella's answer was to throw her arms around both of them, squeezing tight. Best Christmas present ever. Later, after Stella had fallen back asleep between them on the couch, Madeline touched the ring on her finger, wonderingly. Boston? She asked softly. Boston, he confirmed. We'll find a house with a big yard near a good school. Maybe with space for a home office, since I'll be splitting time between there and New York. You make it sound so simple. It won't be. He kissed her temple. But we'll figure it out together. As a family. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in a blanket of white. Christmas lights twinkled through the window, and somewhere in the distance church bells chimed. James held his sleeping daughter, because that's what Stella was now, his daughter, and the woman he loved, feeling for the first time in his life that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Sometimes he realized the biggest risks brought the greatest rewards. And this risk, this leap of faith, it felt like coming home. January brought freezing rain to New York and boxes to Madeline's apartment. James sat cross-legged on the floor, helping Stella sort through her toys while Madeline organized the kitchen. Their Boston house hunt had been successful. A beautiful, colonial with a wraparound porch and a backyard perfect for summer barbecues. Can I bring all my stuffed animals? Stella asked, clutching her favorite teddy bear. Every single one, James assured her. Your new room is twice this size. But not my old drawings, right? She looked at the wall of artwork thoughtfully. Because they're from before. James paused in his packing. Before what, sweetheart? Before you were my extra dad. She said it matter-of-factly, but something in her voice made James's heart clench. Hey. He pulled her into his lap. Those drawings are part of our story. They're special. Madeline appeared in the doorway, watching them with soft eyes. They'd settled into an easy rhythm since the engagement, planning the move to Boston while savoring their last weeks in New York. But sometimes, like now, the weight of the changes hit them. I have an idea, Madeline said, joining them on the floor. Why don't we make a memory box? We can put your favorite drawings, photos, and special things inside. That way we'll always remember where our family started. Stella brightened. Can we put in the picture from the coffee shop? The first one? Of course. James smiled, remembering that morning months ago. And maybe that purple crayon you gave me? You kept it? Stella's eyes widened. I keep everything you give me. He reached for his wallet, pulling out a folded paper dinosaur, worn but carefully preserved. See? Tears filled Madeline's eyes as she watched them. Just then her phone buzzed. The hospital. Carter, she answered, moving to the hallway. James and Stella continued sorting, but he could hear the tension in her voice. When she returned, her face was pale. Everything okay? He asked. One of my long-term patients. She swallowed hard. Little boy, leukemia. He's not doing well. They're asking for me. Go, James said immediately. We've got this here. But the packing. Mom, Stella said seriously. You have to help sick kids. That's your superpower, remember? Madeline knelt, hugging Stella tight. When did you get so wise? Must be genetic, James winked, earning a watery smile from his fiancée. After Madeline left, James and Stella worked on the memory box, filling it with treasures from the past year. Photos, drawings, ticket stubs from their first movie together. The dried maple leaf from Central Park. James? Stella asked as they worked. Can I ask you something important? Always. She twisted her hands nervously. When you marry Mom, can I call you Dad? Not all the time, she added quickly. Just sometimes, when it feels right. James felt his throat close up. Come here, kiddo. She climbed into his lap, fitting perfectly against his chest. Is that okay? It's more than okay. He kissed the top of her head. It's perfect, but only when you're ready, and only if you want to. I want to. She played with his tie, something she did when thinking hard. I talked to Dad about it, James stilled. You did? At the butterfly garden. Mom takes me there to talk to him sometimes. She looked up at James, her eyes serious. I asked if it was okay to love you too. And you know what? What? A butterfly landed right on my nose. Mom says that means yes. James hugged her tighter, his own eyes wet now. Your dad was a very special person, and I promise you I'll do my best to be worthy of being your extra dad. They spent the afternoon creating the memory box, adding special touches like glitter, Stella's idea, and a lock, James's contribution. When Madeline returned that evening, exhausted and emotional, they were waiting with hot chocolate and cookies. He's gone, she said simply, sinking onto the couch. Sweet little Oliver. James held her while she cried, Stella curled up on her other side. This was family too, he realized, sharing the hard moments, carrying each other's pain. Later that night, after Stella was asleep, they sat among the half-packed boxes, leaning on each other. I've been thinking, James said quietly. Dangerous. Habit. He smiled against her hair. What if we set up a foundation, in Oliver's name, for pediatric cancer research? Madeline sat up, looking at him. Really? Really. Between my connections and your medical expertise, we could make a difference. He took her hand, running his thumb over her engagement ring. It could be our first project together in Boston. Fresh tears filled her eyes, but these were different. Have I told you lately that I love you? You might have mentioned it. He kissed her softly, but I never get tired of hearing it. Dad? Stella's voice came from her bedroom. Can you check for monsters? The boxes are making weird shadows. They both froze at her use of the word. Then Madeline smiled, squeezing his hand. Go on, Dad. Duty calls. James walked to Stella's room, his heart so full it hurt. She was sitting up in bed, clutching her teddy bear. No monsters allowed in Boston, he told her, making a show of checking the closet and under the bed. House rule. She giggled, then grew serious. I called you Dad. Was that okay? More than okay. He sat on the edge of her bed. It was the best moment of my life. Even better than when Mom said she'd marry you. Tied for first place. He tucked her in, smoothing back her curls. Get some sleep, sweetheart. Big day tomorrow. James? She caught his hand as he stood. I'm glad you're my extra dad. Me too, kiddo. He kissed her forehead. Me too. When he returned to the living room, Madeline was holding the memory box, looking through its contents. She called me Dad, he said, still amazed. I heard. She set down the box, pulling him close. You okay? Better than okay. He rested his forehead against hers. I'm perfect. And he was. Here, surrounded by boxes and memories and the two people who had changed his life completely, James Montgomery was exactly where he belonged. Tomorrow they would continue packing, planning their move, building their future. But tonight, in this moment, they were already home. Spring blossomed in Boston, painting their new neighborhood in shades of pink and white. Cherry blossoms lined the streets, and morning light streamed through the bay windows of their colonial home. James stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his bow tie for the 10th time. Need help? Rose appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the wedding. You look nervous. I've argued cases before the Supreme Court, James said, fumbling, with the tie again. But this matters more. Rose stepped forward, fixing his tie with practiced hands. You know, when Madeline first told me about the scary lawyer who saved Stella, I never imagined we'd be here. Makes two of us. James smiled, remembering that day. Best impulse decision of my life. Daddy! Stella burst into the room, her flower girl dress swishing around her. The word came naturally now, seamlessly alternating with James in a way that felt perfectly right. Mom's crying again. Happy tears? He asked, already knowing the answer. She says she's just being silly. Stella twirled, showing off her dress. But I think she misses Dad, the first one. James knelt down to her level. It's okay to miss him, sweetheart. He should be here. But he is. Stella touched the locket around her neck. A gift from James containing a photo of Daniel on one side and their new family on the other. Mom says he sent you to us, like a guardian angel but in a fancy suit. Rose laughed, wiping her own tears. Come on, flower girl, let's go check on your mom. Once alone, James walked to the window. The backyard had been transformed for the wedding. White chairs, floral arches, twinkling lights in the trees. Simple but elegant, just like Madeline wanted. His phone buzzed. A text from his best man confirming the rings were safe. Another from the foundation board, congratulating him on yesterday's successful fundraiser launch. The Oliver's Wings Foundation had already raised millions for pediatric cancer research. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Everyone decent? Madeline? He turned, alarmed. You're not supposed to be here. Bad luck is for people who believe in it. She stepped into the room, radiant in her wedding dress. I needed to see you. James felt his breath catch. You're beautiful. You're biased. But she smiled, moving closer. I've been thinking about that day, when you saved Stella. Best accidental meeting ever. Was it, though? She straightened his already perfect tie. Accidental? What do you mean? I used to think everything happened for a reason. Then I lost Daniel and nothing made sense anymore. She met his eyes. But then you showed up. This brilliant, successful man who could have had anyone, but somehow fell in love with a tired single mom and her chatty daughter. Best decision I ever made. See? She touched his face gently. Maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe we were always meant to find each other. James pulled her close, breathing in her familiar vanilla scent. Your mascara's going to run. Worth it. She kissed him softly. I love you, James Montgomery. I love you too. He wiped a tear from her cheek. Even though you're breaking all kinds of wedding traditions right now. A commotion in the hallway made them jump apart. Mom, Stella's voice carried through the door. Grandma says you're not supposed to see Daddy yet. They laughed, caught like teenagers. Go, James whispered, before we scandalize the whole wedding party. See? You at the altar? Madeline kissed him once more, quick and sweet, then slipped out. An hour later, James stood under an arch of cherry blossoms as string music filled the air. The guests, a mix of New York lawyers, Boston medical staff, and family friends, turned as the music changed. Stella came first, scattering rose petals, with careful precision. She caught James's eye and winked, their secret signal for special moments. Then Madeline appeared on Rose's arm, and the world seemed to stop. She walked toward him through the falling cherry blossoms, and James felt his heart expand with a love so profound it almost hurt. The ceremony passed in a blur of emotions. They had written their own vows, James promising to love both his girls forever, Madeline making him tear up with her words about second chances and fate disguised as accidents. But the moment that would stay with him forever came during the ring exchange. Wait, Stella said suddenly, standing up from her front row seat. She pulled out a carefully folded paper from her dress pocket. I wrote something too. The officiant nodded, and Stella stood between them, unfolding her paper with trembling hands. Dear Mom and Dad, she began, her voice clear and strong. Thank you for showing me that love is bigger than sadness, that families can grow in different ways, that sometimes the best gifts come from accidents, like when Dad saved me from the taxi. James felt Madeline's hand tighten in his as Stella continued. Mom, thank you for being brave enough to love again. And Dad, my extra, bonus, wonderful Dad, thank you for loving us exactly as we are. She looked up at them, eyes shining. I promise to be the best daughter ever, to both my dads, and to always believe in superheroes in fancy suits. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. James lifted Stella into his arms, holding her close as Madeline wrapped them both in a hug. I love you, he whispered to both of them. My perfect, amazing family. The reception was a joyous celebration, full of laughter and dancing. James twirled Stella until she was dizzy, slow danced with Madeline under the stars, and even managed a teary dance with Rose, who officially welcomed him to the family. Later, as the party wound down, they sat on their porch swing, watching the last guests leave. Stella had fallen asleep on James's lap, still clutching her flower basket. "Happy?" Madeline asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. James looked at his sleeping daughter, at his beautiful wife, at the home and life they'd built together. "Beyond happy. This is everything I never knew I wanted. Funny how life works out." She played with her rings. Her new wedding band, nestled perfectly against her engagement ring. One moment you're a successful lawyer who doesn't need anyone. The next you're wrapped around the finger of a 5-year-old with golden curls. "Almost 7 now," Madeline corrected. "Time flies." Speaking of time, James took a deep breath. "There's something I've been wanting to discuss." "Oh? What would you think about making our family a little bigger?" Madeline sat up, looking at him with wide eyes. "James Montgomery, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "Maybe." He smiled, nervous but excited. "Stella's been asking for a sibling. Have you two been plotting behind my back?" "Maybe a little." He kissed her temple. "What do you think?" Madeline was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "I think that love has a funny way of expanding to fill whatever space we give it. Is that a yes?" Instead of answering, she kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. Above them, stars twinkled in the spring sky. Cherry blossoms drifted on the evening breeze, and somewhere in the distance, a car horn honked, reminding them of where their story began. James held his family close, marveling at how perfectly they fit together. From that first moment of instinct on a New York street to this quiet evening on their Boston porch, their love story had been anything but conventional. But then again, the best stories usually weren't. "Mom," Stella mumbled sleepily, "did we live happily ever after?" Madeline caught James's eye, both of them smiling at their daughter's question. "No, baby," James answered, holding them both closer. "We're living happily right now, and that's even better." If you could go back in time and change a single moment of fear that prevented you from experiencing great love, what would it be? Just as Madeline had to overcome the fear of loving again after losing Daniel, we all carry fears that sometimes prevent us from finding happiness. What moment would you change in your story? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.